Hello, friends, and welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. My name is Scott Cowan, and I'm the host of the show. Each episode, I have a conversation with an interesting guest who is living in or from Washington State. These are casual conversations with real and interesting people. I think you're going to like the show. So let's jump right in with today's guest. Well, welcome back to this episode of the Exploring Washington State podcast. My guest today is Scott Price of the Price Sculpture Forest on Whidbey Island. So Scott, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Scott. I'm glad to be here.
Scott and I tried to record this a week ago. We had some technical challenges. We're back today. We're going to make it happen. Scott, for my audience that doesn't know about Whidbey that much or about your sculpture forest, give me a super quick high-level overview of what's going on at the sculpture forest in 2025.
Sure. Yeah. So we're a community sculpture park and nature preserve in Coopville, which is right in the middle of Whidbey Island. Whidbey's, for those who don't know, is northwest of Seattle, and it's accessed by two ferries or a bridge. So it's got lots of ways to get on here. And we have basically a 0.6 of a mile, very accessible walking path through the forest, and when you come around corners, you will hopefully be surprised and delighted by the next outdoor art piece that you come upon, some of which are on the ground like usual, others are even suspended up in the air between trees, and we even have a world's first version of an augmented reality sculpture exhibition at the sculpture park, and we're continually adding. So, like this year, we're bringing in some new art. We have a dance event where professional dancers come in and actually dance around the sculptures, interpreting the sculptures, and bringing in. We're expanding the parking lot. A whole bunch of things. There's always something new going on.
All right. Now, when I read about the park, there's some interesting information online. So you and your wife purchased the land. It's approximately 15 acres, or at least what you originally purchased was approximately 15 acres. And you were thinking about building your home there. For one reason or another, you elected to not do that. And the way it sounds online is you were looking to sell the property to somebody who would be a good steward of it. Whether you found somebody or not, you ended up keeping the property, and you ended up basically making it so nobody can develop it in perpetuity. And he turned it into a free public access sculpture forest. The biggest question that pops out of all of that for me is, were you a fan or supporter of the arts before this, or what was the motivation for you to turn this into an outdoor art gallery, for lack of an articulate way of putting it?
Sure. Yeah. If you said 20 years ago that I'd be creating a sculpture park, public sculpture park, it was definitely not on my vision board, so to speak. It was something that happened organically, and you did a good job of explaining the initial steps that I went through, and from deciding not to build there to putting a conservation easement on it, and but then I started. The next step, to answer your question, was when I permanently protected it with the conservation easement. I said, well, I could, since I'm not going to build on it, and the idea is to preserve it, it would certainly be nice to share it with the public. It's a very, very, very very healthy, very, very verdant, very old forest, and it would be really nice for just a place for somebody to perhaps take a walk. So my first idea was to just put a path through it and say, okay, well, I'll just open it to the community and share it with them. And then the next step, which was the big step, was I happened to be traveling. I enjoy traveling. My family does as well. And we happened to go to 3 different sculpture parks, somewhat back to back in a way, different trips, but different weekends, but we happened to go to some. And and as I was going in, some of them, they weren't like the Seattle Art Museum one in downtown Seattle that's on the waterfront, which is this mega project, and some of them were on a smaller scale, and I got to thinking, is it possible for me to single-handedly create a public sculpture park? And yes, we now know. And but a lot of work. I saved up my money for quite a while to put the infrastructure in, and a lot of time spent on designing and thinking about what would I like in a sculpture park. Not necessarily what other sculpture parks have done, and which makes it a somewhat unique experience in some cases. And it was also an expression of being interested in the arts. I used to be represented by some galleries in the past, but it was for photography. It was not for sculpture. I've been asked, do I have any sculptures in the sculpture park? And usually what I tell people is that I have one sculpture, and the sculpture is now 16 acres. We added an acre, but I have a 16-acre sculpture, and it's the sculpture park.
Okay. But you did have an artistic background. I mean, as a photographer, so you were interested in the arts before this. All right.
Yes. Yeah. And I was involved with some arts organizations and things like that as well. Yes.
So you mentioned saving some money. It took some time. From the time that you got the idea to the time that you, quote unquote, I want to say open the doors, but there's no doors, but till you opened for the public, how long was that process?
Yeah, it was probably about 7 years. The total process. Yeah, the initial process was on preserving the property, and that was when I was more focused on conservation easement and how I was going to protect it in perpetuity. But the interesting thing there was I had to think about what were the permitted uses, because when you put in place a conservation easement like that, you have to state from the beginning what's allowed, because if it's not stated, then it's not allowed. So at that time I had to think bigger and bigger. And I thought about the trail, and then I thought about the park. And so that there's actually a 35-page single space document that, is publicly available that describes that, yes, I can put in these things. And so I had to think ahead. I really did, because every part of that vision, if you want to use that word, of where I want it to go is not in place yet, but I had to think about where I want it to go, because basically the safety barriers, or the guardrails that are being put on what can be done there, I had to decide now, 12 years ago, and work within that.
What can be put on there? For example, could you put a small structure that would serve as a gift shop, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, good question. Yes, I not necessarily a gift shop, although that would probably be allowed, but it's more oriented to a gallery. So
Okay.
I did an indoor gallery, and a community space. In other words, a place that people could meet, perhaps, as well as exhibit. And that is in the conservation easement. It hasn't been built. There's no structure on the property.
Right.
But at the same time, that was put in there, just thinking ahead that I may want to add indoor art exhibitions, maybe some 2D in addition to sculpture, even though the focus would certainly always be with sculpture. And also, things such as doing offshoots to the existing trails, that's allowed. I can expand the parking lot. Things along those lines
Right.
are in there to allow for future growth.
Now, I don't know the ownership structure, but you were the owner. Maybe it's in the nonprofit's name now. But what if you, let's say 5 years from now, you come back and you go, well, really want to do, let's just say we want to put a gift shop in. I'm going to specifically call it a gift shop, not a gallery, just a gift shop. And that isn't technically in the conservation easement. Is there a process that you could go back and ask for that to be?
There is
Okay.
the Whidbey Communal Land Trust is the organization, the great organization. I've been a member for decades and used to be on their board, and I love what they do. And they're the ones who hold the conservation easement and actually essentially check that it's being fulfilled. And if there is a valid request, then there is a process to request something. However, frankly, if it's not something that really continues the original vision of being open to the community, providing a sculpture park, and also preserving the forest and the habitat there, they may say no. So it's not like just because they're making a request that doesn't mean they would necessarily get accepted. But there is a process for that, but it's not a unilateral process. I can't decide that. And okay. I still own the property, but it's under the control of the 501c3 and that I put in place when we opened, and all of the infrastructure and the sculptures that I purchased and the trails and parking lot and everything else that I put in place, I donated to the 501c3, and then the land itself is just in my will that, upon my passing, that it just goes to the nonprofit. So.
Okay. So obviously, and I'm being kind of facetious, you're not going to call up the conservation group and go, "Hey, I want to put condos here." That's not going to happen.
That's right. Exactly. Right. Yeah. I pretty much guarantee that it would not happen.
Not a bad thing. Yeah. Not a bad thing at all. Okay. So you've answered some other questions I was going to have, but so you spent 7 years kind of planning. You've been open for 5.
Yes.
As of when we're recording this, it's May 2025. How many sculptures, physical sculptures, we'll come back to the other part, physical sculptures are in the park right now?
Yeah, I believe it's about 36, plus or minus, but I believe it's about 36 right now. Okay. And I believe when we opened, we had about 20 or so, and then we've gradually added a few, not many, but a few have been rotated out, and now we're at 36. Well, I have a number of design principles there that I put in place, and one of them is that there are some exceptions, but for the most part, when you see and you're experiencing one sculpture, you don't see any other sculptures. And so in other words, there's a maximum number of sculptures I want there, because I don't want it to seem like a gallery where it's just like bam, 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 bam. They're just all lined up kind of thing. Every sculpture has its own space, and it's also where it's located for a reason. Every single sculpture, I can tell you why it's located where it's at for a specific reason. And so because of that, we only have about maybe 3 or 4 spots left right now. And then after that, then it'll be a matter of rotating out actually what we already have.
All right. How was this when you in that 7-year window where you started to explore this, and is it getting closer and closer to it, like coming together? How was the community's response to this when you started presenting it to the community?
Great. The one thing I love is that we now get people from all over the world, which is terrific, and it's become I guess you could say, an attraction or a destination on its own. In other words, people are coming to it now, the park, and then going to other places. Initially, when we opened, it was more people were coming to other places, and then they'd ask a local and say, "Where else should we see?" And they'd say, "Oh, you should check out this little park. It's down the road here." But now we're getting more and more people from all over. But to answer your question, the local community has been very receptive, and the thing that I hear so often, and it really just kind of heartwarming to hear, is so many locals just independently, they're not hearing each other say this, independently, they say that whenever they have a visitor come visit them on Whidbey where they live, one of the very top places they always take their guests is to the sculpture park. And to me, that's a good vote of confidence. And everybody's been very supportive of it from the beginning. And, and it ranges from neighbors, matter of fact, some of our best volunteers are actually immediate neighbors. So, immediate, it's close. And then you go out and, the town of Coopville is very supportive. The local chamber of commerce, they love it because it brings in people. We've been getting really good media attention, which brings in from like some magazines and newspapers, and so that helps bring people in for tourism. So it has been a very supportive thing from everyone in the community.
All right. When you first started looking for sculptures, how did you go and find artists whose sculptures would work outdoors? What was how did you start to source the sculptures for the park?
Yeah, it was really three ways of doing that. One was I actually put out a national call for artists and used an online platform where a lot of artists are aware of it. It's it has a really wide distribution, and paid to put out that call for artists. That got me connected with people that I wouldn't have otherwise known. And then I also, on Whidbey locally, I knew of artists that I respected their work. I also, in some cases, knew of specific examples of work. And I said, I'd love to have that piece in the sculpture park. And they didn't necessarily, in some cases, they might have known me, but in other cases they didn't, but I knew of them locally and I would reach out to them. And then in other cases, on a national level, I knew of sculptors who had absolutely no idea who I was, and the sculpture park wasn't even open, but I knew of their work and I was very impressed with it. And I would see individual sculptures or styles that I thought would be a great fit, and I reached out to them, and some of them became really big supporters. I mean, it was a risk for them, especially some of the more famous ones. Like there's one sculptor, Jeff Kahn from Pennsylvania, and he's had stuff all over the country. He does incredible work, and he had no idea who I was, but he really believed in the vision of what we were trying to do, and he became just a huge supporter, and we've got a really amazing piece of his in the sculpture park, and it's been there from the beginning before we opened, which again, big risk on his part, but he took it, and now he's got a very prominent spot that a lot of people have enjoyed. So just one example among many of people. Now we have one sculptor from Amsterdam now, so we actually have somebody from outside of the U.S. as well. She's Daniela Rabinovitz, and she has a huge flying fish sculpture that literally are 27 feet wide, and it's suspended in the air going through the trees of a school of fish. And
at first, you were buying the art out of your own personal account. How does the sculpture forest? Are you still funding the sculptures directly, or does the 503 have? Are you raising funds for new pieces, or how are you growing the collection?
Yeah, my goal is to make the take a step back to get it started. It was 100% me. Since then, my goal has been to make it self-sustaining as much as possible. I'm still certainly by far putting in the most hours, obviously as a volunteer. But when I seek out grants, and then also we get donations, which are mostly, just small dollar amounts in our donation box, but I add those up, and I've been trying to make it sustainable for the future. If I get abducted by aliens, I want want to make sure that the sculpture forest can continue. So basically, we actually have 5 different models on how we have sculptures in the park, and these have been in place for a while, even from the beginning. As you said, some of them I purchased. In addition, we also have some that have been outright donated by the sculptor because they believe in what we're doing and they'd like to be a part of it. We also have some that are on long-term loan by a sculptor. We have a few that are actually for sale. So you wouldn't necessarily know it. It's not like it has a for sale sticker on it, but if you go into it, we have a free self-guided tour that is provided, and in that tour it says that. And then the fifth source is we have a few that have been donated by a patron. In other words, we have those donated by me, we have some donated by the sculptors, and then we have some that are donated by a patron, usually in memory of somebody. So it's actually 5 different models now. We've got sculptures in the park.
The sarcasm in me goes, there's you didn't say there's, there should be like a for sale sign, like going back to, remember, like, you're younger than me, but remember like Keha, where Minnie Pearl or whatever her name was had the little tag on her hat?
Sure.
I don't know. That's just what flashed in my head. Has the sculpture park facilitated a sale of any of has anyone bought a sculpture from the park?
Well, yes. Most of what happens though is artists get commissions. In other words, and I've heard a number of those stories. So somebody is in the park, and a visitor comes and sees it, and in our self-guided tour information, we give we give the artist's website, their email address, I mean the whole deal, and they make a direct contact. And some of the artists have told me that they've received commissions. So and that's the way I love that kind of thing, because it's even better than a sculpture being removed from the sculpture park, because the time and effort, and obviously if it's there, we love it in the first place. So it really kind of warms my heart more when an artist can make a living and make income because of something that is in the sculpture park. And but somebody sees it and wants to basically commission or hire that artist to create something else new.
That's wonderful. Since you mentioned when we got started, you're nearing capacity for the placements of sculptures. So I have 2 questions. One, you mentioned you could maybe rotate through, rotate stuff, which a lot of museums and galleries do that all the time. They put something away. So we have that as an option, but because a certain piece might not look good in a specific location. You need, it's not just like you're hanging it on a wall type thing. So you've got to take into account the environment that the sculpture is going to be placed in, which might limit you in what you can replace out because you've got those difficulties. But do you have any ideas about maybe expanding the walking paths so that you could take more of the I don't want to say take more of the forest, and that way that sounds like bad, but open up more of the forest for visitors, and thus open up more placement locations for additional art?
Yeah. By the way, you hit the nail on the head as far as how important it is that some of the sculptures are fit their environment, and also, for instance, when I'm making decisions on new sculptures coming in, they need to not only fit the environment and fit the quality bar up front, but on top of that, they have to also blend well with the rest of the collection that's already there. In some cases, I've turned down really high quality art because it's either similar to something we already have, or it doesn't quite fit our themes. We actually have themes there, which is kind of unusual for a sculpture park. But anyhow, so that's definitely hitting the nail on the head. It's an important part of the selection process, actually. As far as your question about the trails, I have looked at several places where we might do some offshoot trails. In other words, kind of like an out and back little spur trail. However, the trails, I have two loop trails. One of them is intentionally very flat and accessible. We've had a number of people who go through there in wheelchairs, walkers, mobility scooters, things like that. And that's on the flat part of the property, and that's to give those people good access to a pretty forest environment to actually go on a hike, so to speak,
Right.
but in a very accessible way. And then there's a sloped part of the trail or of the property where there's a trail that would be harder. It's just steeper, so it'd be harder for that. So I actually have it separate, and it's also a loop, and that provides some views and some access. And each of those two loops is themed differently. So anyhow, as far as adding more trails, I don't want people to be looking at other people on like the other side of the trail. So I don't want too many trails in there, actually. I want, when you're walking on the trail, it should seem like you're in the middle of the forest and you don't see other people. So if I made it too dense with a network of trails, you'd probably look through the woods and see other people. So what we have, I think, is good, but we do have some opportunity to expand it if we'd like to.
I really like how you're curating this experience, that you're taking. So many people would go, well, I can put more. And I sometimes more is much less.
I completely agree. And, there are some areas, for instance, where we could put a trail, and my thought is, well, that's an unimpeded section of forest that you can look deep into, and that's the intended experience there. So instead of putting a trail through it, you're looking deep into a forest, and that's good. I know that won't be developed because it's part of the property.
Right. Now I'm scanning through the website right now, which I'll put a link in the show notes. These are pretty good size installations. So from a logistics standpoint, what sort of equipment have you had to use to get a sculpture in place and placed? And these are not just something that you're going to carry in on your back. They're pretty good size. So what does the logistics look like?
Yeah, it varies significantly. Some of them have arrived in pieces, so the individual pieces are manageable on hand trucks, or in some cases, literally a lawnmower with a trailer on the back, because it's a trail. It's a 4 foot wide the trail, so it's not like we can take a pickup truck back there. I could expand the trail if I wanted to, but I don't want to. I want it to be a trail, so it is a consideration. The heaviest one that we have is a stone one by Sue Taves called We Are Water. And how we got around that one was we actually installed it near the parking lot. so we used a Kubota tractor to come in with that one, and that was fine because that was pretty relatively easy. The most difficult one, not length of time. We've had some that have taken a week to install, but this one just took essentially a day to install. But we have a Tyrannosaurus Rex by Joe Treat, and it's not only huge, but it's one piece. It does not come apart, and it's got a wide stance with these big feet. And to get that in, I was on the head, my father was on the tail, and I hired 4 guys from a local moving company with straps, and they got in the center and put the straps around their chest and their necks and their shoulders, and all of us, we were sweating like crazy. That was physically the most difficult one to get in place. But now that it's in place, it's in a great spot. And even though it was a lot of effort to put it there, it was funny when afterwards when Joe came to take a look at where we had set it, he said, "Yep, this is staying here," and he was very kind, and he donated it to the sculpture forest. You know?
I'm looking at the photo that you have on the website with the little girl leaning up against it, and I'm looking at it going, yeah, that's pretty substantial. And
oh yeah, it's very
maybe
that
it came like maybe you had to assemble it, which in and of itself.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. We didn't. It was all one piece. Yeah, there was nothing to take apart on that. There are some other larger, much even larger than that but they come in pieces, you know, and they're bolted together on site. And we've had to use things with pulleys and tripods that are way up in the air to get pieces up and things like that. But we make do. I mean, you know, except for, like I said, and occasionally a small lawn tractor. Literally, I'm talking about a tractor that mows grass. I mean, just a small little long tractor. And other than that, we've had no mechanized equipment bring all this stuff in. It's mostly been hand trucks and wheelbarrows for most of it, you know, or people just grabbing ends of stuff like the T-Rex and hauling it, you know.
So I'm not familiar with the artist Joe Treat. Where is he based out of? He's
based in Bow, which familiar, north of Seattle, and he actually has basically a zoo in the front yard of his home, and I had heard about him, and we started talking, and the fun thing was after we put in T-Rex, he got excited, I got excited, and he said, "Oh, let's think about putting something else in the sculpture forest," and I have a limit, I have a maximum of 2 by any particular artist. So we looked at one more, and among his huge menagerie of animals that he's got there, he had a gorilla, and we have this big, basically old growth stump that sticks out of the ground, and it's pretty high. It sticks out about 8 feet, and maybe probably a little more than that actually. And I said, "Oh, the gorilla would be great standing on top of that stump." So now the gorilla looks down upon everybody who walks by, and that's by Joe as well.
So how did he get this T-Rex to you? Because
Yeah, it was we brought a trailer to him, and we figured out a way to using ratchets and levers and a whole bunch of stuff to get it onto the trailer. And the funny thing was that that Deception Pass Bridge, which is a fairly famous bridge, and it's the most visited state park in the state, Deception Pass. When we brought the T-Rex on the trailer across the bridge, my father had the great suggestion, and he said, you should get a picture of this going across the bridge. So it was actually him and I, and driving it back. So he pulled off on the side of the road, and I ran down the road onto the bridge with a camera, and got it coming across the Deception Pass Bridge, and as part of the park opening, the local newspaper, the Whidbey News-Times, they loved the photo so much that the photo of this Tyrannosaurus Rex coming across the Deception Pass Bridge was on the front top of the front page, very top, and I've never seen this before or since. They usually have black and white print, but they actually used red print, and it said "Wild Art" was the headline, and it was this T-Rex coming across the Deception Pass Bridge.
I found a larger photo of it on your website in the blog section, and the photo that you have in the photo gallery with the little girl and just the head is impressive, but it doesn't hold a candle to this full shot.
Well, the nice thing about that is, like I said, everything's placed where it is for a reason. And that one is intentionally placed behind an old growth stump with a lot of ferns and some large ocean spray and some other bushes. And you come down the path and all of a sudden there's those teeth right there in your face. And I have, and it's not like I hang out there, but I hang out in that spot. And just me, the few times when I've been walking down the path and I happen to be following people, I have many times heard people literally yelp, and then they're laughing,
Right.
and then they're laughing, and that's exactly the point, So
I don't mean to laugh at people, but that's wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so we could talk for quite a while about how you got that thing in here. I just yikes. Okay. When you mentioned people visiting, what has been the feedback that you've received from your visitors?
Yeah, a lot of it has been, I would say, variations on appreciation, which is great. That really makes everybody, not only me, but all the volunteers that help put the sculpture forest together and keep it running. When people really appreciate it, it's free. That's one of the many guiding principles, and one of the things is there's no barrier to entry. So people come in and they have a really positive, I like to say in some cases maybe it's grandiose, but hopefully somewhat life affirming. And what I mean by that is, they walk out happier than when they walk in. And I've had, for instance, we have a book, like most people would call it a guest book, but I call it the participation book at the exit kiosk. And I encourage people, they can certainly put just their name and where they're from, like a regular guest book, but it encourages right on the cover and on the sign for people to put a haiku, or to do a drawing, or to, say something that is, meaningful to them, or things like that. And some of the things that I've heard, just, really, really incredible. Like, one lady was talking about how she was incredibly down in life, and at the end of going through it, she felt so much better about the possibilities in her life. And I'm, wow.
Yes.
that's I mean, to have that kind of effect on somebody, not that it has that kind of effect on everybody, I'm definitely not saying that, but to somebody to kind of put that on paper. And I mean, the way she was writing, it sounded almost suicidal in a way, before. And then she said, things are more positive now. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I got to meet that person in person, but most of it is, joy, or they have a really good family experience, because it's certainly not just for kids, but parents love it, and kids tend to love it as well. A lot of kids will say, can we go back through again, and people also really like the nature integrated art aspect. The fact that they're experiencing both art and nature in the same experience, and it's not just one or the other. It's not a gallery with blank white walls, and it's not just a walk through the woods kind of thing. And they're blended well together.
You've been open for 5 years. Any major surprises?
I'd say the biggest surprise, and the biggest surprise would be the generosity of people that I've encountered along the way. And by saying that, I don't mean that people aren't generous, but I mean, more so than I would have thought. And when you take into account the terrific artists that we have there, and how they've participated and are sharing their work with everybody, and especially the volunteers, because without the volunteers, and that there's a lot of work there that it seems invisible, because we're known for having a well-maintained, good experience, and having everything together, and that doesn't just happen magically. And the generosity of time and effort of the volunteers has been incredible too, and it's been a very pleasant surprise. It was an unknown when I opened it up. It was like, okay, here we go. Let's see how this community experiment works, and it has been working, which is great.
Before we recorded this, we recorded an episode of What's Your Washington where I asked you 3 questions about Whidbey Island, right? And I'm not going to spoil it, but you shared a song, and I'm still annoyed with you. Got to be honest, still, because it's in my head. But it was, it was about Disneyland, and I mentioned how Disneyland is, at least when I was there, and it's been a number of years now, but it was always very clean and spotless, and the visitor's experience was so well curated without you really knowing it was being curated, because everybody from the custodian who's emptying the trash can is in a costume appropriate for the area. They worked really hard at keeping the park looking pristine, which is not what you're trying to do. You're a forest, but it sounds like to me that you and the volunteers have this pride that's similar to that in the sense that you want it to present well. Now, it's an outdoor, natural environment, so that is a little different. But you mentioned volunteers also. Approximately how many people are volunteering at this time to help keep the park going? Or the forest. I'm going to call it a park off and on, I'm sure, but the forest going.
Sure. I'd say as far as active volunteers, it's a pretty small group. It's probably about 6 people. And then we occasionally get some others that, you probably say like 4 or 5 others that participate as they can. We definitely, like many nonprofits, we definitely actually need more, but at the same time, between myself and the other volunteers, we're able to do it, or at least, it basically, if we had more volunteers, we would do even more, is one of those kinds of things. But one of the guiding principles is we don't do more for quantity. We stick with what we got as long as we can maintain the quality. And if we have capacity, and the capacity could either be people or it could be funding or whatever, if we have capacity for more, then we'll do more. But that's never, we don't move on to the next shiny object and then forget that our existing objects need to be cared for. So we always make sure that the foundation of what we created is cared for, and then we build on top of that if we have the capacity to do it.
About how much time does the forest take of yours on a weekly basis?
Yeah, it certainly changed over time. The big year ramping up to opening, I was generally working. Fortunately, my wife was able to take over. We worked together on a business as far as our income, and she was essentially able to take over for the most part during that year. And between me and some other volunteers, we were able to get it done. But the 6 years leading up was a lot of design and permits and concepts and reaching out to people. Still a lot of time. But that year before, I was probably doing about 70 hour work weeks for the entire year, and it was just on the sculpture forest, and I had a business and a family. So it was pretty extreme year. But since then, it became a lot more reasonable. At this point, depending, it's probably probably about 15 hours a week, with spikes that, are more like if we're bringing in something new. And, just for me, I'm not including the other volunteers, just
Right.
answering your question about for me, it's probably about that.
About 15 hours.
And then
Okay.
and then it spikes when we have something new going on.
Something else that you guys are doing is this augmented reality. How did you come to the decision to add augmented reality to the forest?
Yeah, from a couple of perspectives, I was thinking about how to increase the diversity of the experience beyond just diversity of sculptures, of physical sculptures on site. And I had seen how some, including digital artists, were creating augmented reality. And in some cases, they even created purely digital augmented reality. I don't know if you call it a sculpture, but it was an art form. In other words, you could do augmented reality as on your devices, and you could see something that was not in the actual world, but augmented. By the way, to clarify, just so your listeners understand, virtual reality, you can think of it as putting like goggles on, and you're looking at a world that is entirely created. What you're looking at. Augmented reality is where you're seeing the real world, and there's something augmented. There's something on top of that that's integrated with the real world. And what I initially wanted to do was, I had several ideas, and I was able to connect with a startup company that's based out of California and Mexico called Prefixa, and they were really excited about some of the ideas that I was talking about, because for me it would create something that, like, our first exhibition was actually a first of its kind in the entire world, and I'll explain that a little bit. And so it got them an opportunity to develop their technology, and that they can use for other purposes other than sculpture parks, potentially in the future. And then for us, we got to do something that was really cool. That I initially thought that the kids would love it, and they do, but the reality is all ages love it. I hear the giggles and the, oh, you got to check this out, from people who are way past being a kid. That's for sure. So what we did was meaning me and this startup company, developed a process where the artists could actually take their physical real world sculpture and bring it into augmented reality. And we actually essentially put it on a pedestal in the sculpture park. So when you look at it, you just see a pedestal. And then you download an app. We have free Wi-Fi right there, and a free high-speed Wi-Fi where you can download the app to your phone or your tablet. And then all of a sudden, there's this sculpture sitting on top of the pedestal. You can even take your picture with it, but you can stand by it and take your picture with it, but it's not actually there. It's augmented reality, and it's been fun. We're actually on our second exhibition of the augmented reality sculptures right now, and we're now working on a third variation. We're going to keep the existing exhibition, and then we're going to take augmented reality into the sculpture forest and add augmented reality on top of existing sculptures. We're working on that now. That doesn't exist yet. We're literally testing out ideas and things like that right now. That's a pretty complicated process, but it looks like we'll probably be able to do it. So we're hoping that we might even be able to have that done later this year.
So how many augmented reality sculptures does the park have right now? Well, everyone, Scott and I lost connection. We've lost the thread, and we were talking about augmented reality. So, Scott, I had a couple of questions about augmented reality. You're baffling me with this one thing. You say that the visitor can, using their modern smartphone, whether it be Apple or Android or their tablet, they can take a picture of themselves with the sculpture. How on earth is that working?
Yeah, that's actually a part of the app. So when you are using the app and you're using the camera of your app, so you look through, let's say, your phone, and you see the trees, you see the ground, you see the people you're with, you see reality, and then when you scan by the pedestal, oh my gosh, wait a minute, there's there's a large sculpture there, and you look around and it's not actually there in the air, but you look through your camera and it sure is there. You can walk around 360 degrees. You can bring your camera in real close and see fine detail. You can move back, you can look up, you can look down. I mean, it's incredible, the detail that's in these models. And so the app itself, when you are looking at reality, which might include either you or your friend standing beside the pedestal, it has a photo button. And you literally just tap the photo button in the app, and it takes a photo and it puts it in with all your other photos on your camera or on your phone through your camera. And yeah, it's there just like a regular photo of you standing by a sculpture that actually was not physically there.
What does this require of the artist? How does the artist, what do they have to do to capture these images that, because if you're saying 360 view, I can zoom in, I can zoom out, that means somebody's had to take, whether it's like in the real estate space, they have like the Matterport camera. You might have heard of that before, the 3D things. Mm-hmm. What are they using to capture the sculpture?
Yeah, well, that's what this startup has done. They've enabled a way to make it straightforward for that user, meaning an artist. They don't have to know anything about augmented reality. They don't have to have technical coding skills or anything like that. There's a lot of technical work on the back end, but that's invisible to the artist. And literally through a series of videos and photos, through a specific process that the startup company has created, and it's a guide. It doesn't actually take that long. I mean, they've created a guide. They tell what to do, and then you upload the files to an online folder, and then this company takes it and runs with it. And and what you're seeing in augmented reality, that's not a video, that's not a photo per se, but they're able to extract the information from that and create a 3D model from it. Which is the actual augmented reality, which allows you to walk around and look up and look down and look in and look out and
that's crazy.
All that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's okay. We're just going to stop there because I could go way down that rabbit hole and hijack everything. We're going to bring this one home. But I want to ask, you've got volunteers. The park's open year round. Park is free for visitors. Donations, of course, are welcomed. What's the busiest month?
Generally, it seems to be August. Okay. It's certainly July and August are the top two. Whidbey is certainly a well-known tourist destination, and the population certainly bulges in the summer. The difference of getting on a ferry in July and August versus the rest of the year, and a little bit of June, a little bit of September, is quite different compared to the rest of the year. That's for sure. If you want to come on Saturday morning or Friday afternoon, you can plan on a couple hours waiting at least, right. Especially if it's nice weather.
And earlier on, because this episode broke, so I don't know if it was in the first episode or where we were at, but you mentioned that some cleanup, some of the sculptures have been in place for 5 years, in the elements for 5 years. How much time do you spend and the volunteers spend maintaining the sculptures?
Yeah, quite a bit. We a couple, several of our volunteers, my father Ken, and some other volunteers, Craig and Cindy, and myself, all go around and work on cleaning various things, and then. On top of that, every once in a while, like what we're doing this year, we're really focusing on more deep cleaning. And what I mean by that is, there's always the wipe off of the pollen and all that kind of stuff that kind of occurs on a regular basis. But after being outdoors, any material, no matter what it is, it's going to get stuff on it, whatever that is.
Right.
And, dirt from splattering rain, or, rain that comes down, or even in some cases, it might have moss, like for instance on T-Rex, which is made of bark. I have to go down and every once in a while put moss killer on the bark, because it's otherwise, to moss, it's just a decomposing tree.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah. So gotta treat it accordingly.
Well, before I ask you my questions I ask all my guests, what have we not mentioned that we should have mentioned about the forest? What does the listener need to know that maybe we didn't touch on?
Yeah. I would say one thing I mentioned the themes, and I think it might be interesting for folks to know. We have two themes. Each is an individual loop. I mentioned the two loops.
Yes.
One is called Nature Nurtured, and it's everything centered around the non-human natural world. So most of the sculptures, not entirely, but most of the sculptures have a representation of that. And it could be inanimate parts like wind, or it could be animate parts like an eagle or something like that, or many other things. And then the other trail is called Whimsy Way, and that one is intended to show really the fun side of art, and it's a wide range. Some of them are kind of funny and humorous. Some of them are whimsical, obviously by its name, Whimsy Way, and some of them are just kind of wild in their own way. So providing those two themes actually gives us a way to hone in on what we're doing in terms of you're either in or out, and then on top of that, it also provides some big themes that we'd like to do so that people have a positive experience. Again, we're obviously a natural habitat, so we're about nature, and then the Whimsy Way part is about the fact that art can be fun. It's not just a snooty experience, that some people have. I mean, we try to make art relatable to people. We have very high quality art. It's not stuff that is just from anywhere and anybody, but it's very relatable. And that's another thing that's really important to the experience is so that people come out really feeling that they've connected with art and nature. It's not just looking at the black square on a wall that supposedly has some deep meaning, and people just some people get that meaning, and other people look at it and go, wow, that's art, and so we really want people to be able to relate to the art. And very abstract art, to clarify, is completely valid on its own, but we really try to make sure that people have an experience that they can understand. And that's part of our self-guided tour too. It's actually accessed through phones, and it includes, for every sculpture, there's a video that is it's just like 3 to 5 minutes long, interviewing each sculptor, and he or she is actually standing right by the sculpture that you're standing by. And so it's like you walk along, and if you're interested to see the videos, it's like every sculptor is literally standing there and giving you a private tour. But then there's also photos and text if you just like a quick scan kind of thing instead of seeing the videos.
I really like that idea. I really like that. Okay, so I've got one last question about the forest, and this is gonna be a hard question. Okay. I know that you may not answer this question, although I'm going to hope that you do. So from your frequently asked questions page, it says, when is the Sculpture Forest open? We are open every day of the year from 8 a.m. until 7 p.m. or sunset, whichever occurs earlier. Okay. That's the parameters.
Yes.
In your opinion, for you, and I'm only asking you to speak for yourself, not for potential viewers of the Sculpture Forest. When's your favorite time of the day to go to the forest?
Interesting. I would say it depends upon time of year because the sun, changes. If you say it's at 4 o'clock, if you say, well, let's say if it's at 5 o'clock, if it's December 21st at 5 o'clock, it's a big difference than, right. June 21st. But I really like it when there's a certain part of the day when I'd say maybe about an hour before sunset, roughly, where there are several sculptures in particular, but there are a lot of sculptures that get this slanting light that shines on them. And for example, we have a wire mesh sculpture by Elizabeth Berrien, who is from Olympia, and it's a 3/4 size horse that's with a 17-foot wingspan. It's a Pegasus, and it's up in the trees. And many people who go through will they don't even see it. And we actually like that. In other words, there's like this Where's Waldo experience of, the fact that some people don't find it is actually part of the fun, because a lot of times these people are like, oh, I got to go back. I got to see it, and then when people do see it, they're like, oh, this is great. I see it. Can you see it? And, but there's a certain angle where when you get light on it, it glows like it's in a spotlight, and it's so incredibly obvious. It's like you could not miss it. But if you don't have the sun on at a certain angle, it blends into the trees, and actually people don't see it. So, and that's an example. There are other ones that time of day it tends to be some really nice light shining on some of the sculptures through the trees. Because what happens is it's coming in at an angle then, as opposed to up above, you have the dark canopy, and you don't tend to get as much of the direct light.
All right. So your family lives in Coopville, nearby.
Yes.
According to your site, you're outdoorsy, traveling, hiking, camping, mountain biking, kayaking, cross-country skiing, dabbling in just about everything else, including bungee jumping. Have you bungee jumped?
I have.
Okay, we'll just move on. What? Okay, so I'm not going to call you an adrenaline junkie, but bungee jumping is, boy, man, that's what.
When I was younger,
what activity do you want to try?
What I want to try. Interesting. Let's see here. The one thing, it's not a big deal. It's certainly not something I would put up as an adrenaline junkie thing, but I have tried 3 different times to go in a hot air balloon. And every single time that I've gone, it has been canceled because of weather. and this has been going on for about 20 years. So to answer your question, it's the first thing that pops to mind, because I've been trying to go on a hot air balloon. Obviously, I let years go by between attempts, but that would probably be one thing I'd like to do. A lot of things that I like to do now are oriented to travel. My daughter and I do have dirt bikes, and I am thinking about maybe even doing some what they would call senior class, maybe dirt bike races. So that's something that I would like to do in the near future.
Okay. Has your wife bungee jumped?
Yes.
Okay, so I got something for you. Go down to Mary Hill. Have you been down to Mary Hill Museum?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They skateboard down that hill.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that one's on my list. But
Okay. All right. So I always ask my guests these questions. So, number 1, where's a great place to get coffee on Whidbey?
I will caveat my answer with the fact that I don't drink coffee.
Right.
So I'm a freak of nature in the Pacific Northwest, apparently. I do go to a coffee shop. There's actually a number of good coffee shops in the Coopville area.
Okay.
I go to one in particular because it has, I'm sure, very good coffee. I don't know, but it has a great chocolate peanut butter smoothie.
Yeah, that's super solid. That's super solid.
And that's what I get. And it's a place called Sunshine Drip, and it's in Coopville.
Sunshine Drip, but you get in the peanut butter smoothie, which I have to be honest with you, as much as I love coffee, if I walked in there and I saw that on the menu, if I didn't have my blinders on for coffee, right? If I saw that, I would skip coffee probably, or have both. I don't know. Okay.
It's very good. I used to get the traditional fruit smoothie kind of thing. And one time my daughter got the chocolate peanut butter smoothie, and I said, "Hey, can I try a sip?" And since then I've never gotten a different, any other type of smoothie.
All right. All right.
It's always that.
So because the ferries can be problematic, my plans to get to Whidbey were to get there in the morning, but it's lunchtime now because I was laid up by the ferry. So where should I grab lunch?
Yeah, so in Coopville, there are also a number of good lunch spots. The one that comes to mind that offers more than food, and that's why I would recommend it, is a place called Beaver Tails. And they have good food, but there are other places that have good food as well in Coopville. The thing that makes this place special are several things. It's in a building that was built over 100 years ago on the end of a wharf in Coopville, so it's literally over the water. And when you get your food there, you can take it outside on the picnic tables, and you get this panoramic view of Penn Cove. So it's one thing that's pretty unique. And then it's also been formed by a mixed couple from Native Americans, and they are making it into a Native American cultural hub, which is an interesting thing that's taking root. And then the third aspect that's related to what I just mentioned is that the Coopville area, or the Coopville downtown, was just certified by the state of Washington as a creative district. And this place, Beaver Tails, is a place that is going to be used for events and things like that. So it has a creative element to it as well. And we're a partner with that creative district element. So so it's got good food, but it's got more depth to it than that.
That's wonderful. All right. My final question of you, and I warned you about this question. I warned you that it was going to be really, really hard, demanding question, hard-hitting journalism, whatever you want to say. Okay, you ready?
Okay, here we go.
Cake or pie, and why?
Which do I prefer?
Yes.
I would say pie.
All right.
Although I like both, and I do have a sweet tooth. And the why is that cake, I so frequently have to scrape off the frosting because it's just too much, That's one thing. And then on the pie side, I really like the combination of the harder but flaky crust with the fruit and the gooey syrupy interior, and you get that contrast more than you get with cake. With cake, it's kind of like spongy stuff with frosting on it. Generally, I know it can be more than that, but whereas with pie, you get that mixture. And then actually, I really like ice cream too, and ice cream goes really well with pie. So,
all right. What type of pie?
Actually, the classic. I love. There's many types of pie I like, but I really like apple pie.
All right.
I enjoy that.
So follow-up question, because I'm trying to. This is good-natured research. Okay, I'm trying to determine if there's a correlation between what your household had when you were growing up versus what you like now. So when you were a kid growing up, did you guys have a lot of cake? Did you have a lot of pie? What was the dessert of your family's choice?
I would say we had more actual cake than pie.
Okay.
Pie tended to be only at certain holidays, maybe Thanksgiving, perhaps Christmas.
Okay.
But cake would be certainly for birthdays, but also other times as well. Probably more cake than pie.
Interesting. All right. Well, Scott, thank you. This is I'm looking forward to coming up to the island. I've got a number of things I have to go to the island for, which is a really wonderful opportunity. In fact, maybe I'm getting to the point where I've got more things to do than I'm going to need more time, which is great. But I'm looking forward to going to the forest and walking around. The augmented reality thing is, I'm still trying to wrap my brain around it. I get it, but I know I'm going to be amused by the idea of it. I'll probably like, oh, this is kind of cool. And when I walk around going, how can I take a selfie? Anyway, that to me, I've got to see to really process. And I'm really intrigued by the fact that you bought a bunch of land. You're going to use it for a house. It didn't work. Most people would have just sold it off and not necessarily had, I don't want to say a care, but you would have just sold it to somebody who would purchase it and maybe developed it. Who knows what they would have done with it? They certainly probably wouldn't have put a sculpture forest there. But you stopped, you paused, you reassessed. You spent 7 years planning this thing, man. You've got a lot of time into this thing. And you're giving it to the community. That I just really am impressed and think we need more people doing things like this than.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Scott. It's very kind of you.
Yeah, I really kudos to you and your family for doing this. So thank you so much for being on the show. And also,
thank you. Fun.
Thank you for being so patient with technology, because you and I have certainly had our challenges making this happen. So I appreciate you getting us to the finish line.
And it has happened.
Yes. All right. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed the show. You can reach me on Twitter at ExploreWaState. I'd love to hear your comments. You can also visit our website at explorewashingtonstate.com. If you know anyone who would like the show, it'd be amazing if you'd share the show with them. This is the biggest way that we grow this show. Good old word of mouth. Glad you were here with me today, and I hope to have you listening to the next episode. See you then.